Yo, hold on. We're about to have to instantaneously do something that's not related to the podcast. Don't worry, guys. I already set up social media alerts for the show. So we got that going for us right now. So we don't have to spend 15 minutes waiting for me to make tweets and such. Sorry. Trying to finish these up real quick, but shout out to everybody who's hopping in. Like I say all the time, currently or in the distant future. Any form of the future, actually. Yo, did I really use that many hashtags? Live. Stream. Yep, we're good. Copy and paste, baby. The backbone of every successful podcaster, let's be for real. And also the unsuccessful ones. They don't tell you that part. It's the backbone of unsuccessful podcasters as well. AKA me. We're going to try and power through this episode, guys, to be honest with you. Already running late. You guys know the drill. Live stream. And let's do that. Need a couple more things to go my way real quick. Control V right here. Oh, hold on. We're almost there, guys. 6:37. Block. Sorry. I should have Twitch open too. I do have Twitch open, my bad. I do. I forgot. I have the I told you guys I've been using the what's it called? The Discovery thing. Anyway, shout out to whoever is out there checking out the show. We're about to get it on and popping here. If you got any sports questions or hot takes, you know what? I'll even allow you guys to do lukewarm takes today, especially since my head is killing me for some reason. I have no idea why. Oh, snap. Yeah, like straight up though, I have no idea why my head's hurting. I think I need to eat more food. By the way, guys, lost 8 pounds recently, so feeling pretty not slender, but feeling good, especially since we have nationals in a month. And your boy road tripping all the way to Salt Lake City, Utah, in case you had not heard. So if you're out there and about, let me know. Maybe I can make a detour. Come say what's up. Or if you got any suggestions along the way, like from Houston to Salt Lake City, like any cool shit that you think I should go check out, please let me know. I'm down. I really am. I'm trying to load up and get shit ready, bro. Get it set up. What else we got? We got somebody out here watching us as we get ready. Did I tell you guys that my test has come to fruition? I was testing to see if there was a song that comes up on copyright claims, and apparently it does not. So I'm gonna use it. I think I'm gonna use it as my new theme song. Really. Yeah, hold on a second, guys. Sorry about that. Anyway, let's kick it off. Let's get it going. Oh, man. This is so much easier. If I had known, I would have been using the studio thing for a lot longer. But, your boy's kind of slow on the uptake. If I ever go straight Twitch, this will be clutch. But as of right now, we are solely... As of right now, we're only... we're simulcasting. So, time to get the show popping. Let's get it going. I got everything set up. We're only going to get super serious one time today, guys. All right. So starting in 3, 2, 1. Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, and everybody else in between, I'm Ashton Gene Lewis. This is the Broke Boys Sports Podcast, and coming to you live on episode 186. If you've been joining us for Study Hall, which happens every single Tuesday, except that one time it didn't. If you've been joining us for Study Hall, you've been having a good time. Study Hall ran super long. It's only supposed to be an hour and a half, but this week it was 2 hours because we got distracted by a lot of stuff. It was a glimpse into the absolutely moronic way that I researched for this podcast, and we're about to see if it all pans out for us at the end here, ladies and gentlemen. We're about to see if it all tallies up into a good show. So you let me know in the comments if you think the way that I study for this show is actually effective, and if not, keep it to yourself. If you disagree, keep it to yourself. You know what I mean? Anyway, we have... Sorry, I'm trying to make sure there's not an audio thing going on in the background. Anyway, I thought I heard something. Whatever. Shout out to everybody who's checking out the show. I really appreciate you out there. And make sure in the comments, if you hear anything that drop your hot takes. Give me your comments on the topics that we're about to discuss here. I want to hear from you. I want to be able to interact and have a good time, really, when it's all said and done. This is a lot more fun for me personally when I have conversations with sports fans, and that takes time. That really does. It takes a good chunk of time to build up an audience to get back and forth with, and I'd like to start on that process. We've gotten ourselves up to 54 followers here very, very recently, so I call that a major success for a podcast that I, quite frankly, don't do a good enough job of advertising, and I'm working on that personally because somehow I posted the Study Hall episode and it got 5 viewers, 5 extra views that I, other than me going in there and double checking to make sure nothing sounded off or weird or anything like that. But it got a couple of views, which was clutch. But I appreciate it. If there was one part of this show that I expect to not get any viewership whatsoever, it is 100% Study Hall. But I want to build to a point where Study Hall is actually enjoyable for everybody that ends up showing up, and maybe we learn something along the way. Maybe we gain some friends and they become the thing that we knew all along. If you look at the ticker, this week's ticker is not the NBA schedule for this upcoming weekend. It is instead the remaining portion of the high-end free agents that are left in the NFL. Sorry, I'm trying to fix something here. Something's gone horribly wrong. What's new, Ashton? Ha ha ha. Alright. That was weird. It's still weird. Whatever. I'll move on with my life. Technology sucks. The Twitch app sucks. Anyway. We got a lot of show to get to. We got a lot of stuff to get to, really, when it's all said and done. But we're gonna power through. We're gonna power through, ladies and gents. Don't forget, if you like what you hear here, actually, you know what? Not even if you don't like what you hear here, if you want to become my arch nemesis Follow me on social media at FB_playbook. Follow the show's Twitter account at BrokeBoyPod. Follow me, my personal Twitter account at TheAshtonJ. Follow me on Instagram and on TikTok at TheAshtonForever. And then, of course, like and subscribe to this video that you're watching right now. So if you are out there in the world, in the wide world of the internet, and you're checking out this here episode of the Broke Boys Sports Podcast, first of all, I appreciate you. Second of all, make sure you like and subscribe before you head out. And then same thing goes for those of you watching on Twitch. Make sure you follow. I appreciate every single follow that we get. Other stuff going on. This week's episode has a very long name. It is Ray McCloud's Fro. If you have not seen it, please allow me to show you something that truly is a work of art. Very similar to the TikTok trend that was going around. This is a work of art. That thing. Anyway, I don't know why I just did that noise. But yeah, I'll show this to you right now because I'm that good of a host for you. That is Ray McCloud, former safety for the Atlanta Falcons. Played for a lot of different teams throughout the course of his NFL career. And somehow, after all these years, I did not know Ray McCloud had the best hair in all of the NFL. And just immaculate on so many different levels. Clearly a man who has somehow defied the odds when it comes to football, because there is one thing that's terrible for your hair. It is hands down, without question, a football helmet. It pushes it down, moves it in weird places. That's why people have like all kinds of headbands. They have skull caps to make sure that it keeps your hair organized into one spot and all that kind of stuff like that. But Ray McCloud somehow defying the odds out here and quite frankly, defying the general expectation for the amazing nature that a man's hair can take in general. Out here showing people how it should be done. He's out here educating the general populace, and I salute him for his service, ladies and gents. We're gonna skip a couple of typical segments for this week's episode because we need to talk about something that's coming up in Worst of the Worst, and it's gonna take a little bit of time, and I don't want to like make this a 3-hour show because I got shit to do this weekend, and I gotta, of course, the sooner I get done with this podcast, the sooner I can start pushing it out to people so that they watch it more. We move on, ladies and gentlemen. We start the show. We skip nerd news this week. Sorry to say, we are skipping nerd news, but we are going to tell you a very, very positive story for Best of the Best. If you don't know, Best of the Best is a segment of this show where I talk about the best thing that's on sports. It is half of the reason that we do this podcast to begin with, because Best of the Best has its counterpart of Worst of the Worst, which is the worst thing that I saw in sports this week. So let's dive right into it. Best of the Best, ladies and gentlemen. The Sneaker Wars are back. First of all, Sneaker Wars being back in general is always good for my heart and me personally. If you are not aware, there's a secret battle that is constantly being fought on every single front imaginable, and it is the war of what goes on your feet. What goes on your shoes? What ends up getting that $200 to whatever amount of dollars out of your wallet that has a name connected to a famous athlete, a famous celebrity, famous former athlete, all that kind of jazz like that. That is the war that is being fought on multiple different fronts. Zach LaVine recently signed with New Balance, making him the Natasha Cloud and Kawhi Leonard, making him the third high-profile basketball player to join up with New Balance as they have entered the Sneaker Wars to attempt to dethrone the reigning undisputed champs in our time, ladies and gentlemen, in Nike. So, speaking of Nike, they've struck a critical blow to what we all thought was going to be part of a segment that a part of Nike that we thought we'd never see again. The Nike deal that was struck between the Kobe Bryant estate, aka Vanessa Bryant, and the actual like legal entity that is the Kobe Bryant estate, which is of course the control of his money and all that kind of stuff like that, and the control of his likeness and images and everything that goes along with that. They have struck a new deal, something that I personally didn't think was going to happen based off of how negative the breakup was after they didn't re-sign, because Vanessa Bryant felt like the post-career offer for Kobe Bryant, despite the fact that his shoes were some of the most popular amongst current inactive NBA players, right up there with LeBron James, or right up there with Michael Jordan in some aspects of it, in the sense that at one point a fourth of the league that is, fourth of basketball players in the NBA were rocking Kobe's in some way, shape, or form on any given night. Kobe had built up a great repertoire, and of course, that a lot of that has to do with the design work. And I don't know how much influence Kobe Bryant had on how his shoes were built and formed and stuff like that, but obviously the quality of the shoe plus the designs that were associated with it are vastly important to the great legacy of the Kobe sneaker. And we're starting to see it come to fruition here because it seems like it's something that Nike could not do without, as they have struck a new deal with the Kobe Bryant estate, and apparently they will be re-releasing the 11 signature models of the Kobe's, and then of course they have allegedly they have 6 postseason shoes that they're going to release with the Kobe's. The re-release of Kobe Bryant's post-career shoes, which I didn't know were a thing, but apparently they're just going to go through and re-release all of Kobe Bryant's old sneakers. And there's an added wrinkle to this, and you can see it at the bottom of this. For the best of the best, this is probably the best of the best part. Not only the best of the best, where like, you know, Vanessa Bryant and Nike. Vanessa Bryant's going to have money to make sure she can take care of her family from Nike, and now the Bryant family doesn't have to do what they originally were doing, which is go out there and design their own shoe, which, not design their own shoe, but like take the image and likeness that Kobe and the logo and all that kind of stuff like that, and then basically have to rebuild the brand with another company and start that from the ground up. They are not doing that this time around, but what is happening in this for this re-signing of a deal with Nike and Kobe, Gigi, his daughter who passed away in that horrifying helicopter crash, will also be a major part of a charitable move on the part of Nike. 100% of the proceeds from Gigi's sneaker that is being sold. Remember, we had this conversation about the Mamacita, which was the shoe that somehow ended up in the hands of like a random reseller in the UK, and they ended up like raffling that off or something like that. They ended up like raffling off the sneaker in some way, shape, or form, and then had to like hunt them back down. So there was like a limited number of the Mamacita that was released out into the world, and it was against the wishes of Vanessa Bryant apparently, and it was also during a weird time where like Nike's deal with Kobe had expired, so they technically did not have the right to be able to sell a Kobe branded sneaker, but they ended up doing that. So this is the quote: with the new partnership, fans will soon be able to have access to Kobe and Gigi Nike products for years to come, Vanessa Bryant said. Nike is donating 100% of the net proceeds yearly from Gianna's shoe to our Mamba and Mambacita Sports Foundation, which is dope because that ends up going into the Mamba Academy. So that's gonna be huge for supporting the developing the foundation of basketball, which is the youth continuing to play basketball, to continue to find the next great superstar that can have an impact like Kobe Bryant did when he existed here on this earth. Yeah, these are that's the situation that's going on. So Nike figured it out. I guess they worked it out, and they got to a situation where I guess Vanessa Bryant actually felt comfortable with what was being offered, because I remember the big deal was the amount of money that they were offering to not only her, offering to Kobe before he passed away was like ridiculously low in comparison to the likeness of Michael Jordan, the deal that he has that's a lifetime deal, and the same lifetime deal that LeBron James has, which I have to assume in some way, shape, or form involves like part ownership of Nike, right? Like it has to involve like stock ownership of Nike, not just a finite amount of money. I always joke that I always joke that like the contract should just be like, I now own 1% of Nike. Like 1% of a giant of a $1 billion or billions of dollar company like Nike is massive generational type wealth. Like very few people actually own a full percentage of a behemoth of a company like Nike does. So being like, I'll take 1% for the rest of my life, 1% of total sales for the rest of my life, and we'll call it even. You can use my name, image, and likeness until I'm dead in the ground, and even beyond that if I like the price. Anyway, that being said, it is time for our first of two hydration breaks here, ladies and gentlemen. Hopefully we're going to play a song that doesn't get us hit with copyright claims from YouTube. We are playing songs from Christina Gukis, which she used a beat software to make her beats, and apparently YouTube takes it upon themselves that when they have their bots listen into the audio produced on videos, they hit things for sounding similar to different songs. So like there's multiple instances where there are people who have used the same beat software that Christina has used to make her songs, and the song will sound like Christina's beat or their shared beat for a grand total of 5 seconds, and it'll be enough to hit it with the copyright claim. And then a week later, the copyright claim will disappear. But guess what? By the time that's happened, the stuff discussed in that podcast is outdated. So that's fun. That's fun for me personally. But here we go. We're gonna hit our hydration break where we take a second before we go into worst of the worst, and you're gonna need it, ladies and gentlemen. If you haven't figured out what worst of the worst is, it'll become very evident very clearly when I change to the next slide. But while we are sitting here waiting, I will take a second. You're going to take a second. We're both going to ingest some form of liquid that will hydrate us. Me personally, I have a brown liquid that I'm going to ingest that's going to hydrate me. You do what you got to do. I'm going to do me. You do you. And we'll be right back in 3 minutes and 8 seconds. We're going to play Humble Beliefs by Christina Gucas. We're not playing that one. That one actually got hit for copyright. And we're back here live on the Broke Boys Sports Podcast. Hopefully you guys enjoyed that hydration break. I took a shot of whiskey, so this show is about to get a little bit more intense. I'm kidding. It actually won't. It takes a lot more than that, ladies and gents. I will admit, I went to Cidercade last night, which is actually, I think it's like a national chain at this point, because I think I've seen one in LA, but it's an arcade where you can pay like $10, you get unlimited games, and you also get to drink, you don't get unlimited drinks or whatever, but you get to buy like ciders, like, you know, Bishop ciders and all that kind of jazz like that. And I mean, last night it was pretty tasty. I did the typical thing that I do when I walk in, the douchebaggy thing when you walk up to the counter and you ask for the highest APB of the alcohol. Sorry, I'm trying to respond here to something stupid. Anyway, yeah, so you go to the counter and you ask for the strongest cider thing, because I really am not a fan of like anything that's not just like straight liquor when it comes to alcohol, because I feel like a lot of the time it's like a roundabout way to try and enjoy it. But you know, what do I know, right? Other people enjoy it for different amounts of reasons, right? You could say the same thing about the fact that I smoke cigars. It would just be a roundabout way of enjoying smoke for a person who smokes weed. Anyway, yeah, I did that last night. It was pretty fun. Actually, was able to feel both of those ciders. I did drink them at an expedient pace, I will admit, because I know that I got to do that. I got to go out there and get it popping. If I want it to happen, I gotta. If I want stuff to happen for me, when in terms of getting buzzed or whatever, I gotta go hard, because my body is so large, and you know, I'm not gonna sit here and talk about like elite. I'm not gonna sit here and pretend that I have like some kind of amazing ability to process alcohol. I'm just like a fat person, and fat people have to drink more to get buzzed or drunk. Anyway, moving on. Let's talk about worst of the worst. This one is called, we talk about the levels to this very complex, I wouldn't even say it's a complex issue, because it's really not that complicated if you think about it in the grand scheme of things. But we're going to talk about Leah Thomas, who, if you have not heard This Week in Sports, she's the 500-meter freestyle national champion from the NCAA. She goes to UPenn. She's a swimmer on the women's team. And about 2 years ago, she decided she was going to transition to becoming a woman. She has felt like she's been a woman most of her life, and now she's going to officially transition. She's officially already begun the transition process for that. She takes hormonal treatment, and there has been a massive uproar. As a matter of fact, I had to unfollow somebody because they posted like something pretty transphobic when it was all said and done. There's a guy that I used to listen to his podcast talking about college football. He's massively successful, all that kind of stuff. So he won't miss my follow. He doesn't care. But I get to control whose opinions I give a shit about in people's podcasts that I listen to. So I unsubscribed. I have no intent of ever listening to his podcast ever again, because something that Sophie Cunningham, who plays in the WNBA, retweeted about how Leah Thomas's presence at the NCAA championship and winning one of the 3 finals that she swam in at the NCAA championships was actually massively disrespectful and hurtful to girls, hurtful to the young ladies that were there. I would also like to point out the guy that I'm talking about has a college football podcast, so I highly doubt he's really keeping up with the rigors and in and outs of collegiate swimming, right? Like collegiate swimming. It's really difficult for me to believe that, especially based off of the degree of intensity that I've heard this guy speak about college football. So it's really difficult for me to believe that he actually gives a shit about the competitive nature of the NCAA swimming championship. It seems like he saw an opportunity to talk about a trans athlete and tear somebody down, and he took it. So, and I see a lot of other people taking an opportunity to do that as well. I listen to a podcast that I listen to on a regular basis called Higher Learning. It is hosted by Rachel Lindsay, who is the first black woman to ever be on The Bachelor. And if you're wondering, I think we've talked about it on the show before, but she didn't marry the guy that she picked on The Bachelor. She actually married another guy that was on her season of The Bachelor. His name is Brian. They're together, all that kind of jazz like that. They're having a great time. And her co-host is Van Lathan, who formerly worked for TMZ. If you guys remember that, if that name sounds eerily familiar, it's because you've probably seen him when they used to air the TMZ show like late at night at like 9 o'clock or whatever. And he's written a bunch of articles that have, piqued a lot of people's interest. He has a lot of different podcasts. He's now a full-time professional podcaster for The Ringer. They had a conversation about trans athletes, and I feel like they were coming from a place where they were a group of people coming from a place where they were trying to understand, like they were trying to find a way for this to feel like it's fair to them, right? And I would like to point out, I am cisgendered. Like I'm a guy, and have always identified as a guy. So most of my experience when it comes to trans people is one, talking to trans people, hearing their stories, reading about trans people and their treatment in other countries, their treatment by other people, the struggle that comes with it, the mentality behind it, because that's the number one thing that always, the number one thing that pops into my head is like, how do you come to this understanding, right, about yourself? Because it seems to be really difficult for a lot of people to come to the understanding that they are a person, or they feel like they are a person trapped in another person's body, or they feel like they're a man trapped in a woman's body, or a woman trapped in a man's body, right? That's a difficult path to walk. And as a person who has a cousin who is trans, I've listened to some of his perspective on life and stuff like that. And luckily for me, my family has saved me a ton of like actual fights, because all of my family makes an active effort to call him by his new name. He used to be called by his dead name. He transitioned when he was like 24. So he's been known by his former name for a long time. He's been this other person in our family for a long time. And many would say, and I think he would even say that he was like living a lie for the sake of other people and for the sake of trying to fit in where you can, and trying to not make life more difficult than it already is, because he is black as well. So, and I'll talk about the different levels of this situation. Leah Thomas, trans athlete, wins a 500-meter freestyle, right? A lot of people, and this is really weird because like nobody actually cared about this situation until Leah won the championship, right? And then all of a sudden that group of people who have made it very known how they feel about trans folk is now constantly talking about her and commenting on her, trying to crack jokes at her expense about how and I think there's some room to question, especially when it comes to athletics, like no, it actually isn't. I've tried to wrap my brain around like how other people perceive trans athletes, and it's really tough for me because, right, like most of you guys know, I play Quidditch, right? And in my sport, it's all inclusive. So like however you identify, you're male, female, non-binary. If you are trans, it doesn't matter. You play as the gender that you want to be identified with. Everybody makes a distinct effort to call you by your preferred pronouns, and people, you within the realm of the rules, you play by your gender that you have chosen or not chosen, in the case of our non-binary folks out there, right? So sometimes it's difficult for me to see from the perspective of like a typical jock who's like only been in a locker room or only played a sport that only involves other guys, right? And in most of my athletic career, I've only played sports with other guys. Like I've only played sports with other guys and 100% guys. Quidditch is my first co-ed sport that I've ever played. So we'll take that as a win, right? I'll also point out some important details about this whole situation, right? I wrote like a long diatribe because I tend to do this when it's like a longer subject and topic of discussion, and especially when you have to look at this from multiple lenses. So I talked about like the societal level, right? Because I personally believe this is another example and another collision of the oppression of two different groups of people. And I'll start with trans folks, right? I'll start with our trans brothers and sisters out there to begin with, right? There's a collection of people in this country that do not believe that, and really in this world, I don't know why I said this country, it's global, right? Transphobia is global. They don't believe trans women are women, and they don't believe trans men are men. That's a thing. We know that because so many people have been taught, like, this is how you identify a boy, this is how you identify a girl, and they're unwilling to recognize the rigidity that comes with that, right? They're unwilling to change. They're unwilling to recognize what they're talking about. Because they're incapable of actually and most of the time I just assume it's like, this is an example of lack of empathy, right? There are so many instances where you can reference, like, there's so many instances in this world that we live in where you can reference, like, genetic anomalies, if you wanted to refer to it, right? So if you talk about a man born in a woman's body, which is what a lot of trans people describe their experiences as. They feel like they are a man trapped in a woman's body, or a woman trapped in a man's body. And so that would be, you would call that like the way they were born is not how they feel, right? And you could talk about how that's similar to a person who, we talk about like genetic differences and genetic divergence and stuff like that, because there are an infinite amount of ways a human being can be born, and everything that goes along with it, right? And of course, somebody can tell me if I'm wholly off the base on this one, but I've heard and I've seen in interviews trans people call the way that they were born a mistake, right? And to sit here and argue that you can see a person born without a leg, or born without limbs, or born without a jaw. I've seen there's a guy on TikTok that I follow who was born without a jaw, right? And see those kind of genetic divergence. They're not. There are people who suffer from gigantism, which is the constant growth of the human body. There are people who suffer from dwarfism. There are people who have better vision. There are people who are naturally born faster than other people because of genetic background. There are people who are genetically more receptive to strength training. There are people who react poorly or react well to eating a certain amount of protein on a regular basis. There are people who are carb sensitive, which is a person who reacts poorly to the ingestion of carbs. They get bloated and stuff like that. That's a thing for human beings, and human beings can come in all kinds of arrays of existences. And so it would be moronic to think that a person can't be born with a different perspective on how they actually feel, right? Their body presents like what we all know to be, or what we all believe is the definition of a man, and what we all believe to be a definition of a woman. And that's another aspect of it too. There are some people who believe that there's only one way that a man and a woman can be, right? And that is the rigidity of this. But the transphobia that I'm talking about, it comes from everywhere. There are countries that have laws against trans folks, right? Like trans people existing. Just like there are countries that have laws against gay people, right? This country, up until the year 2010, it was illegal for gay people to get married. Or, I'm sorry, marriage was written into law as a man and a woman getting married. Now it is not like that anymore, which made gay marriage illegal, right? Being trans is difficult to like a fatal level. You can look up the numbers on trans murder rates. They're higher than they're higher in percentage than other groups of people that exist, right? And you don't even really need to know that. You can just look at how people talk about trans people. You can hear how people talk about trans people and tell that there are plenty of people who, if it really came down to it, and they wanted to, they would attack a trans person for being trans. Like, that's not that hard of a leap to make. It's not that nuanced of a thought, because a lot of people feel like, one, it's a small group. For as far as we know, trans people are a very small percentage of the people on the population, or a percentage of the global population, which makes them an easy target for a lot of other people, because there's really no protections for trans people, right? Like, there's no legal protections in terms of like a hate crime for trans people, and so there is almost no deterrent, especially and we talk about like in America, right? When I'm talking about like hate crime laws. In other countries, there's no protections whatsoever. There are people who, and you can even look back as recently as, even today, there are people who still use the term sissy when describing trans people. There are people who use the other version of trans, right? They use the other form of trans that involves a V to describe trans people. I'm not gonna say it here on this show because once again, that's not my slur. That's not my slur in my collection of people. I have no problem saying nigga on this podcast, but I don't say other people's slurs that hurt other groups of people that I'm not a part of, right? Like I'm not trans, so I'm not gonna say the other word. That being said, like being trans is a fatal thing because society hates trans people. Like on average, based off of the way that Leah Thomas is being treated, it's safe to say that there are people who are reluctant to support trans people. There are people who are hateful towards trans people. And I'm not saying that to be a part of the transphobia, you do not have to be a person that's willing to bash somebody's skull open. That is the far extreme of it, right? But that does not mean that you're not a part of it. In the sense that there are people who can just walk around and not believe that trans women are women and trans men are not men. That's a part of it. That holds people back. That's transphobia. And that's transphobia because you, like, out of spite, refuse to address the existence of that person, refuse to address somebody's existence as if they are not a real person, which is more harmful than you could ever imagine for an individual. As a black person, can confirm historically, based off of the studies of what happened, based off of the history of what's happened to people that look like me, people that come from the places that I come from, or people that, like I said, people that look like me as well. Not recognizing that you're a person or you're a human or recognizing your experience can be life-threatening. And then on top of that, there's actually people out there that are willing to kill trans people and actually want to kill trans people, right? That's a huge deal when this whole thing is said and done, and especially the people that try to use science to defy the concept of what it means to be trans, but also ignore the fact of all the genetic variations of what a human being can present as and exist as. That same science that they use to try and tell you that, like, this is what men do, this is what women do, even though we know for a fact that there's a wide rainbow and spectrum of what human beings can look like, right? There are some people who are so dedicated to the concept of absolutes that they are willing to kill things that defy those absolutes for the betterment of their psyche, right? The other side and the other group of people being oppressed in this is women. I've talked about this wild ass concept on this show before, and I wholeheartedly believe it because I saw what the oppression, and this is a black person commenting on this, right? Like, I've seen what the oppression of black people in sports has done to black people. I've seen what the oppression of black people in other industries and stuff like that has done to black people in terms of holding them back, right? Poor funding for black schools and education or black neighborhoods, making funding for schools connected to property taxes and the environment around it reduces the amount of funding that goes into individual schools and puts more money into schools that are in quote unquote nicer parts of town, right? Like more expensive houses, you get more money for the high school. Cheaper houses, you get less money for the high school. Even though we're all supposed to be receiving the same education, we know for a fact that there are kids who can be in the same city, who can be in the same neighborhood that receive very different levels of education because of the resources that are allocated to them, right? That same logic can be applied and even the oppression of black people within the realm of sports, right, where black people couldn't get an opportunity because there were teams that had secret black quotas. There was a time where, like, black people just weren't allowed to play sports with white people, and it prevented them from doing what a lot of white people feared they would do, which is take over sports, and apparently leave no place for the white man, right? That's like a real thing, except you apply that to men and women. Women have always been held back when it comes to sports. There is almost no point in sports history where, oh man, women got to start this sport the same exact time that men did. You can look at football right now. Like right now in football, I wouldn't even say that it's like you would say even in the society that we live in now, it is massively uncommon for a woman or for a young girl to play football. And even more so, we're talking about the high school level. Most of the time when you see a girl playing football, she's playing kicker, right? She's out there playing the kicker position. There's a couple of times where I've seen a girl play quarterback for a different high school and stuff like that. But the fact of the matter is that the pipeline to get girls into football almost is non-existent, especially before you get to the ranks of high school. And as you know, by the time you get to high school, if you've never played football a day in your life, you have to be a freak level athlete to be able to compete with the years and years of training, years and years of understanding and learning about football in terms of positioning, in terms of formations and stuff like that, how to run routes, how to read blocks, how to create blocks, all that kind of stuff like that. You have to be on a whole nother level. And then you combine that with the overall general societal pressure for women to physically look a certain way, like women who are muscular are frowned upon, right? Like we know that for a fact. You can go to any female bodybuilder and look in her comments, or go to any Reddit forum where there's a picture of a muscular woman and look at the comments, and you can tell, because that's the polar opposite response. And there's a polar opposite response that men get when they become muscular, because men are supposed to be masculine and muscular, right? That is a huge part of the oppression of women in sports, because as we know, physically, your body has to be in peak physical condition for you to play the best for you to compete the absolute best at your sport. And if muscle is frowned upon, or gaining muscle or having muscle is frowned upon in terms of your body type, it deters people away, unlike for men that it does to train to get to that level of being physically present and physically dominant when it comes to muscle. And you're probably wondering, like, God damn, Ashton, how about you just talk about Leah Thomas? We'll get to that in a second. I just want to point out the oppression of trans people, the attacks on trans people, very real. The oppression of women within the realm of sports. As a matter of fact, I even argue that our society, and I'm talking about like our global society, because there's very few countries. I think I've told this story before here. Story on here before. Tony Hawk's mentioned how there are girls in the Middle East that are allowed to skateboard but not play other sports because of like the morality police and whatever connects to their religion that prevents them from playing sports. So they're not allowed to play like soccer and basketball and stuff like that, but they can skateboard. And even when they're skateboarding, they and of course this is like a recent rise of girls skateboarding in the Middle East. That's like a real thing that happened. And when you, once again, the restriction of women, right? That's a whole world of women that are not allowed to play basketball in the year 2022. That's a whole world of women not allowed to play soccer in the year 2022. So even if you are a fantastic athlete, nobody will ever know. That is the type of oppression that has existed for women forever. Since like the dawn of time, you could argue, right? Since the dawn of man, you could argue. And I think that has had almost irreparable damage on female athletes and the culture around female athletes. Because there's a certain, like, once again, women were not allowed to play basketball in America when Coach Naismith discovered basketball. There were multiple coaches, like at the collegiate level, that made modifications to basketball so that girls could play because they didn't like the masculine, aggressive energy that came with basketball as a whole, right? And so there was like women were quote unquote playing basketball, but they had to play a girl version of it as opposed to being able to play the sport. And that went on for a very, very long time, even to the point, like even till very recently. I think Iowa was the last state to outlaw the modified version of basketball that used to exist or whatever. And to try and argue that's what gets me when guys like shit on female athletes. Like you're supposed to be impressive or something like that because you shit on this girl. Because when you talk shit about somebody, that's a person that you're just kind of like, oh man, we should be considered equals, and because we're considered equals, you suck and I'm awesome, right? But then also the same guy actually looks down upon that woman, thinks less of that woman because they have a natural inclination to believe that women are weaker, right? And that's just not true. Like, that's just factually not true. But the argument of this whole thing, when it's all said and done, is that our societal pressures, because some of it, like, let's be for real, a lot of it has come from men holding women back from being able to compete in certain sports, but it's also because men have told women and other women have told women for a long time that they are not capable of doing that they cannot do that has seeped into the minds of young ladies, that has seeped into like the sports culture around women, right? That has prevented women from even trying to compete in other sports that boys are playing. and it has created an athletic gap that, like, let's be for real, if the guys are basically starting the same race that the girls are, but they have a 50-mile head start, and the race is only 100 miles, right? And I think there's something to be said about, like, what effect that has had on this situation, because a lot of the hate that's thrown at Leah Thomas is based off of the presumption, like, it's based off of the overall presumption that men are significantly better athletes than women. And you have to ask yourself, why is that the case, right? We can sit here and talk about estrogen and testosterone until we're blue in the face. But the fact of the matter is, there are girls on this planet, there are high school girls on this planet that can dunk, and there are grown men who can't. And it has nothing to do with height, which, once again, even if it did come down to height, genetic gift, like, what are you supposed to do? It's the same thing we're talking about, right? Like genetic luck, right? But there are men on this planet who cannot dunk right here, have never been able to dunk. Basically, I've been able to graze rim, but there are girls who, at the age of like 16 year old are capable of dunking, whether it be because of height or because of vertical, or more than likely just like every other person that can dunk. It's a combination of the two. That means in some way, shape, or form that there is the possibility that this gap doesn't have to exist. It's not that women aren't physically capable. It's that they haven't been allowed to even do the things that would get them onto the same physical scale as another guy, right? Because just like when men lift weights and it increases the testosterone level in their body, the same thing happens for women. And there are women who are stronger than me in this world. I know one, Sarah Robles, who's an Olympian. There are plenty of women who are stronger than me on this world. There are plenty of women who are stronger than the average guy, right? They are just anomalies when it's all said and done, because there has been so much centered around keeping girls from doing these kind of things. And I think that factors in, the oppression of women factors heavily into the situation with Leah Thomas, because if we lived in a society that didn't have those oppressive guardrails on women, who knows where female athletes would be, right? Like, we could very well live in, if we did not have centuries of oppressing women from competing in sports, we could very well live in a society where men and women compete in the same sports, regardless of gender. We could live in a society where, because women have always been on the same, have always trained, have always had the same opportunity, have always had the same access at the same age as boys do to all sports. Because let's be for real, we can sit here and we talk about till we're blue in the face, like, little girls here in America have the same access age to soccer as boys do. They do not have the same access age to football as boys do. And you can talk about how boys just, like, genetically grow up bigger and stronger and stuff like that, but you can also recognize, like, how does that happen, right? Like, how are humans getting taller and bigger and stronger as time goes on? It is the development of their physical body, and, like, it's not just like there are not just genetics within humans and they stay the exact same from person to person. There's not just a whole, like, one day this young boy woke up and said, I want to go play baseball, and now his parents let him play baseball, right? That's not an opportunity. That's an opportunity that young man was given that the young lady was not. And I think that factors into this as well. So moving on to the next phase of this, we talk about the actual stuff that goes into it. There's a lot of basic bitch arguments that I wanted to address to begin with. There's people, including one of the competitors. By the way, this all got started because the young lady who missed the cut by one spot in the final race to make the cut for the final of the 500 meter freestyle final, basically wrote a letter about how she felt like she tried to do the both sides thing, right? She tried to say, I support and I stand with Leah Thomas, but I also think the rules are unfair, and also because Leah Thomas is not actually a biological woman. And they keep using the term biological, right? Once again, I think that, and so based off of what I just said for the past, like, 5 minutes, you can understand how, like, I see how women have been held back in sports affects the argument of biological man versus biological woman. If you differ, hit me up on Twitter. I'm sure plenty of people don't have the same perspective I do on sports. That's kind of why I have this show. I didn't even cook that up. That's just like a natural inclination and thought I've had. And to be honest with you, it's come from, and I'm not going to sit here and say that I've always thought, because I've met plenty of girl athletes when I was in high school that were better athletes than I were. But, like, more so than ever, seeing the wide range that athletes the form that athletes take on in a co-ed sport like Quidditch. I've seen plenty of female athletes that don't get anywhere near the shine that their inferior male athlete counterparts do. And so I've always found that interesting. And I say inferior not like as a human being, but inferior as an athlete. And I feel like that's okay to say because we're talking about competition, right? Somebody wins, somebody loses. And it's okay to be able to assess the skill level of a person when it's all said and done. But yeah, there was a competitor in the final, or she made it to the qualifying round for the 500 meter freestyle final. Lost. She was literally the last place person in the pool, and she argues that Leah Thomas is taking a spot that actually deservedly belongs to a woman. And so she tried to say that she supports Leah Thomas, and I was like, well, when you try and I don't get how you support somebody by telling them that their reality is not real. But yeah, that was her argument, that Leah Thomas is not a woman, even though Leah Thomas has identified as a woman for going on 2 years now. Some people are still pretty deranged about this concept that people transition from one gender to another to compete and win stuff, which is weird because last time I checked, I mean, if you ask pretty much any woman, going from being a white man to a white woman, the societal exchange you're taking there, especially when people know that you're trans, so you can compete in a non-money sport like swimming, that's a reach. And all that was commentary on society, right? Like, society, and to some part, I've contributed to it, knowingly or unknowingly. It sucks to be a woman, right? Like, it's tough being a woman because of the pressures that society puts on it, the pressure that society puts on women, not because women suck. And that, like, to try and pretend that that's not a real thing is really funny because it takes a person that's that stupid, which you would expect that level of stupidity from somebody who is a misogynist. And then it's really funny to make that argument of like, oh man, they became a woman to make their life better. And it's like, what kind of misogynist are you? You know what I mean? Like, how you gonna be like half sexist? You know what I mean? It's really weird. But yeah, that's my whole commentary on that. What else did I write here? I think I talked about. Oh, there's one other really dumb one, and I implore you to think about this. The question I asked myself is if what the young lady who requested that the rules be changed comes to pass, that would be putting the power to define what a man and who a man and what a woman is, and what makes a man a woman and what makes a man a man, what makes a woman and a man in the hands of the NCAA, which I don't think is like a great idea overall, mainly because like the NCAA, they've been really good at one trick for a long time, and now their trick is non-existent anymore. They've been really good at the trick of stealing money from teenagers. Or stealing money from young adults, I'm sorry. They do steal money from teenagers. They steal money from 18 and 19-year-olds. But when you become a 20-year-old and a 21-year-old and finish college and stuff like that, they really are good at that trick. They've been really good at that trick for a long, long time. In terms of decision-making, outside of how to make money that involves robbing children, no such thing. I don't think I've ever seen... No, the NCAA has shown zero competency when it comes in that department. So like for them to be able to define what a man and what a woman is probably not the greatest idea on the face of the planet. I would also like to talk about, there are some people who, and this is the interesting part too, right? And I say interesting because I say interesting out of ignorance, because it's not interesting to talk about like what makes a man and what makes a woman, because a lot of that is definitely centered around one, self-perception more so than anything. And a lot of it is going to be clouded by societal universal acceptance that's been portrayed by like media for like a long time, right? Like a lot of people define what they don't know about groups of people from the few experiences that they have with them, right? Like I talk about like, I'm not trans. So like I have friends who are trans. I know other people who are trans. I've read interviews from trans people. I've watched documentaries about trans people. I've heard trans people tell their stories. I have not experienced that firsthand. So I draw my information about trans people from other trans people. And I think there are some people out there that haven't done what I've done, especially in a lot of different categories. So they draw their understanding of trans people from media, which, is not real. Like Joanna Man is a movie about a man who transitions to become a woman, to become a great basketball player again, right? And as a kid, I watched Joanna Man a bunch of times. Super messed up now, right? Like it's one of those huge movies where it's like, man, that really perpetuates a really shitty stereotype about trans people that some people are willing to entertain and believe and make that become true in their heart of hearts, right? And that's the problem. Like, once again, like we talk about the connection that, like, the ability that media has in control over other people, because I think that, and if you're a black person or you're a person of color, you know this for a fact because you've seen, like, that there are pockets of white people who have never seen a person of color, right? In this country, in America. There are pockets of black people who have never seen a white person in America in the year 2022. And so their only interaction is what they see on Twitter, what they see on social media, what they see in media, right? So when you see, like, stereotypes portrayed on TV constantly, you assume that is how, like, you assume that is the truth because you have nothing to counteract that truth. And the same thing can go for trans people and trans folks overall. Also very weird that nobody really has brought up the fact that there was another trans athlete that competed at the NCAA championship, Isaac Henning, who identifies as a man but has not gone through hormonal treatment, right? And a lot of trans people will tell you this, and I kind of agree with it as well, because at the end of the day, like, looking like a dude does not mean that you're trans, right? Like, there are some people who just like to wear men's clothing, like that's a real thing. Also, we should also get away from the concept of, like, what's man's clothing, what's women's clothing, other than it's so weird to me because we live in a world where people think dudes wearing tights is feminine, but then watch football on Sunday, right? And then also, like, football players wear skin tight clothes, like, at all times, right? They wear compression shorts and compression shirts. But if a guy outside of a football field were to do that, he would be called feminine or gay. Like, people would just assume that you're a gay guy because you're wearing, like, that tight of a shirt, even though super muscular dudes wear tight shirts all the time. Like, the contradiction is, like, so strange when it's all said and done. It just, how clothing can define who you are and your sexuality in the eyes of a ignorant person. But anyway, that was one thing. There was a trans man, Isaac Henning, who also swam in the NCAA this year. And there was, like, this really weird article from fucking Outkick the Coverage where they apparently talked to one of Leah Thomas's teammates, and they speculated that at one point Leah Thomas, like, pulled up during a 100-meter final with Isaac Henning so Isaac Henning could, like, place better than her. It was really weird. And they, like, brought no evidence other than, like, oh man, she swam slower. She swam, like, 3 seconds slower than she normally does. It's weird. Because that got platformed. Like, I saw that on the Inquirer. I saw that on the Washington Inquirer, which I probably am never going to read again based off of the fact that they put that story on their website. There's a lot of people who have made the argument that it's unfair to other women, or it's unfair to the biological women that are in the sport. I would also like to point out that Leah Thomas also lost multiple races throughout the course of the season. So that means it must not be all that unfair, because beating Leah would mean you are, like, some kind of freak athlete, right? Oh my God, what a concept. Like, freak athletes beat other freak athletes. Anyway, I'd also like to, if you're a person who really kind of has a tough time conceptualizing what's going on in terms of, like, why a trans athlete can't compete in the gender that they have chosen to, I would implore you to ask yourself, like, picture yourself in high school. I picture myself in high school, right? And I think about, like, what if I played football against an NFL player or a future NFL player, not like a current NFL player, but, like, we were the same age. And, like, what if I played against 18-year-old Derrick Henry my senior year of high school? The shit that he can do, the shit that Derrick Henry did and could do to high schoolers when he was 18 or when he was in high school is the same skill gap that people like to pretend that trans athletes have over other women, right? Like the gap is way bigger between some male athletes and other males that exist out there, but nobody wants to talk about that, right? They want to talk about like, oh man, if this guy transitions over, he's just cheating. And it's like, no, like Derrick Henry's not cheating when he stiff arms somebody into oblivion, right? He's utilizing his hard work and his dedication and his talent and his skill to play the sport just like everybody else. So for like people talking about it's unfair or whatever, it's like, I mean, I don't know what to tell you. Is it unfair when you play, like when high schoolers play, like everybody's got a story. If you listen to Bomani Jones's podcast all the time, he asked people about the time that they quit playing football, and like half of those stories are about motherfuckers getting laid out by future NFL players, not even future NFL players, future college athletes that would go on to have like really good college careers. They're like, yeah, he just tuned me up to the point where I like literally walked off. I got hit so hard that I walked off the field, took off my pads, took off my shoulder pads, and went home. Like that kind of stuff, right? And trying to argue that that's any different than a trans athlete competing against people in the gender that they are, right? And it's just like, yo, like better athletes just win, like regardless of what the situation is, man. It's just tough overall because there's so many people who just don't have like there's so many people who have a say in a lot of people's perception of themselves that don't have the capacity to perceive other people's existence. And that's what I took away from that. And that's why I canceled. That's why I got rid of Nerd News. And that's also why I got rid of About a Week Ago, because that went on way too fucking long. And shout out to anybody else who listened all the way through to that argument. I tried to be as concise as I possibly could because I felt like there was like 1,000,000,001 things to point out throughout the course of this thing. But we will power through. And when we get done, we're going to do another hydration break here in like 2 more segments. I'll make these quick. We got We Talking Money. Are we talking money? You know that segment that we do where we talk about money. Anyway, today's number, a jet. A jet is today's price. So Davante Adams recently was traded to the Green Bay Packers. His teammate Kenyon Drake hit him up on Twitter and asked him how much the jersey number 17, which is Davante Adams' number that he is going to be taking. He's already taking it. It's actually not up for sale. But when asked how much it would cost for him to get the number 17, Davante Adams responded with a jet. And then Kenyon Drake quote tweeted it with a gif of him doing a Jets celebration on the field. He said, "Is this good enough?" And so I guess Davante Adams will be wearing the number 17 in Las Vegas. So yeah, there we go. We talking money. We talking money. Moving on, ladies and gentlemen. We got a media suggestion for this week. Another Pivot podcast. Right now there's an ad playing because it is directly linked to the YouTube video. I should have downloaded it and put it on here. Anyway, the guys from the Pivot podcast, Ryan Clark, and Ryan Clark, Fred Taylor, and Channing Crowder, who used to play for the Miami Dolphins. Fred Taylor used to play for the Jacksonville Jaguars. Ryan Clark works for ESPN and was a safety for a very, very long time for the Pittsburgh Steelers. He won a championship with them, and they've now started a new podcast called the Pivot Podcast, which is not a branch off because really, like Brandon Marshall used to have a podcast called, well, he still has it. It's called I Am Athlete. Fred Taylor and Channing Crowder wanted to keep just doing conversations with people, right? Like they didn't want to blow it up into the brand that Brandon Marshall was trying to build with I Am Athlete, because he has like a training facility, a gym. He's trying to get it set up to the point where he's trying to build like an entire industry. Well, not an industry. He's trying to build an entire fitness empire off of the concept of I'm Athlete, and the podcast is going to go a long way for that. Wow, they are taking forever to go through these ads. Let me see if I can fix that. I can't fix that. I should have downloaded the video. I don't know why it's doing that. But anyway, the biggest thing that Brandon Marshall's trying to do with I'm Athlete, he's trying to set up like a completely horizontal expansion and take over like multiple, or get into multiple industries at once with the same brand, and the brand is centered around whatever he wants it to be centered around. I kind of don't care, because honestly his podcast is kind of annoying sometimes, because he very rarely is actually there to talk about he's very rarely there to talk to the guest. And that's the tough part for me. Wow, they literally put a 5-minute ad before this, so we're in trouble here, folks. So I guess we're not going to see any clips from this I Am Athlete podcast unless I do. Let me see. It might skip it. It will not. Anyway, I have the title All Alone because the subject of the I Am Athlete podcast was Michael Beasley. Some of you are familiar with his work as one of the better basketball players of our generation, one of the great athletes of our time, especially when it came to getting to the NBA. He talked about his time with Kansas State. He talked about being betrayed by pretty much every person that he's ever cared about. Essentially, that's what he said happened to him. He said, like, oh man, he's like, everybody took from me, everybody took this from me, everybody took money from me, everybody took something from me in my path. And he talked about his tough upbringing, about how, you know, he grew up with a bunch of siblings, and he grew up with a bunch of siblings who kind of molded him to be a lot tougher. He also mentioned something that was really heartbreaking for me. He talked about how he never really, he kept speaking about, he kept talking about how he never got to play basketball. He's like, it was always some other bullshit that was like, the reason I'm playing basketball today is so that I can get closer to this. And he just wanted to hoop. And I thought that was beautiful. Like, the fact that he was willing to say that, and the fact that he had like a deep enough perception to be like, I just want to hoop. I just want to go out there and play basketball, and nobody's letting me do it. Everybody's always got some reason why I got to play. It's never pure, is what he always wanted it to be. But he did make it out. He talked about the passing of his mother. That was heartbreaking, man. You have to watch the interview. One, he talks about his mental health. He talks about the time period where he was, like, the stuff that was going through his, like, the stuff that he was going through life-wise while people were making fun of him. And he talked about it. He's like, oh man, all they want to do is crack jokes. All they want to do is crack jokes. All they want to do is crack jokes right here. And my mom's dying. All they want to do is crack jokes. Oh man, he forgot his source. My mom has cancer and dying. And it was one of those, and this is why when I come on this podcast, you'll rarely hear me talking shit about players, man. Unless they do just something horribly out of pocket and wrong. I'm just going to close this, man. Because like, they're not going to like actually let me, that was mine. They're not going to actually let me see the video that I'm trying to see, which is weird. Anyway, the like I was saying, he talked about his struggle and everything that was about him. It was really cool to hear his perspective about life, man. It really was. And he's the kind of guy that, you know, he's clearly gone through a lot, and he talks about how he's like, man, he's like, I'm gonna be honest with you, man, I don't have enough energy in my life for new people. And I was like, man, that's some dark stuff. And he's like 30 something years old, right? And me and him are like the same age, I think. Or he's like a year older than me or something. But that's what he talked about. He was just like, I don't have room in my heart for new people after everything that's happened. And I was like, man, it's crazy, like, to get to the top like that, man. And everything that goes down that clearly has permanently scarred him. And he's like, yeah, I just try and be a great dad. That's all I want to do. And that is the note that we're going to leave off on for Media Suggestions. It is a great, great podcast episode. He very clearly opens up about a lot of dark stuff in his life. He talks about, you can clearly hear that he's a person that sat back and watched how the world treats people that are similar to him, right? And how he talks about, he's like, people are screaming for help every day and nobody wants to help them. They want to laugh. They want to crack jokes, and then when it's too late, then all of a sudden everybody's sad. And I was like, yeah, that's something right there. Check it out. It is worth it. 100%. Let's take our last hydration break. When we come back, we're going to talk streaks and peaks in the NBA. We got NFL stuff to talk about, as well as some free agents are being signed up. Dirty Dan has a new team, and we'll talk about that when we get back right here on the Baroka Boys Sports Podcast. Let's see what song we're going to listen to. Let's hear it. Any suggestions from the crowd? I agree, crowd. Let's do Laying in Your Arms. Oh, snap. We're back here live on the Broke Boys Sports Podcast. I'm Ashton G. Lewis. Some people call me the host of the show. I will say that I am the captor of this show. Ooh, my bad. That is a gigantic echo. I am the legal captor of this show. It is somehow I don't really have a choice but to be here, guys. So if anybody wants to take my spot, feel free. Let me know. Other than that, I'm going to have to keep showing up here every Tuesday and every Thursday until I am set free. And I don't know what magical spell it's going to take. So we're just going to, if you're at home, just keep saying magic words randomly throughout the course of the show. And maybe it'll finally set me free. I highly doubt that'll be the case though. So, I'm just going to keep genuinely doing this podcast and trying to have fun. But that brings me to my next segment. I actually made a whole scene for this because it has become such a part of the show. It's called Streaks and Peaks. It's where we talk about the big win streaks and the huge moments for the NBA in the span of the Friday since we last did this show to this Friday that we're on right now. So let's take a second and look at the longest win and losing streaks in the NBA right now. The Phoenix Suns currently leading the entirety of the NBA with 7, and the Boston Celtics got 5 of them things in a row. They've actually been red hot the last month and a half, basically. Really been turning it up, man. Jason Tatum kind of taking over, doing his thing. And you can't help but be anything but impressed with him overall. The Phoenix Suns still doing their thing. I can tell you this right now. The Phoenix Suns so confident Devin Booker told somebody, "Shut up, pussy," that was sitting on the sideline trying to talk shit to him. And then the dude literally said, "Oh, word?" Like he was going to do something. And he basically sat there and watched Devin Booker drive middle and hit a jumper in Patrick Beverley's eye. So, they on that kind of stuff. They don't even have Chris Paul back. That's the wild part, too, man. Cameron Johnson, Mikal Bridges, DeAndre Ayton had a season high of 35 points, ladies and gentlemen. They cooking without their best player right now. And if there was ever anything that is the negative about this, it is the fact that Robert Sarver is the guy who owns the Phoenix Suns. Matt Barnes been trying to tell us about that Matt Barnes been trying to tell us about Robert Sarver being an ass for years. And we just won't listen. I guess we're going to find out the hard way. Anyway, shout out. Why would I shout out an entire NBA franchise? I don't know them like that. But yeah, the longest win streak in the NBA, the Phoenix Suns. The second longest, the Boston Celtics. Longest losing streak currently, disappointingly so, the LA Clippers, which is a bummer because, I love me an underdog story. If there was ever an underdog team, it is the team that is built around 2 superstars, does not have those 2 superstars, and is still in position to not only claim a playoff spot, to not only just get into the play-in tournament, but claim a playoff spot. So I'm hoping the Clippers can pull it back together, man, because they hold the 6th seed right now, if I'm not mistaken. Off the top of my head, let me double check that for you real quick. I know, absolutely exhilarating watching Google searches for the resources for this podcast, but nonetheless, ladies and gentlemen, it must be done. For us to get an accurate show here. Let's go Western Conference. The Clippers are currently the 8th seed, so even if we were just doing the regular, straight-up old NBA playoff rules, they would still be in the playoffs, which is crazy to think about because they lost Paul George relatively early on in the season. They've been carried off the back of Nicholas Batum, somebody who I've had to defend on multiple occasions, mainly because I've had my jump shot compared to his. When it comes to beer pong, do not ask follow-up questions. I will not be answering them. But yeah, Nicholas Batum. Combine that with the fact that your boy Reggie Jackson, one of the most underrated parts of that Oklahoma City Thunder team. Who would have thought all these years later? Imagine a team that had Reggie Jackson, Serge Ibaka, Kevin Durant, Russell Westbrook, James Harden. Who else is on there? Steven Adams, too, right? Steven Adams is on that team, too, man. That's crazy. Think about all those dudes are on the same team, and now none of them there. Many would argue the person that made that happen may not be good at his job. I'm just saying, just a theory, just a thought, ladies and gents. Maybe Sam Presti, little overhyped. That's just my opinion. Anyway, moving on to my next. I got peaks here, so we got peaks coming up. Did I do it correctly? I think I did it right. I think we got it, ladies and gents. This is Streaks and Peaks. This is the Peaks part of Streaks and Peaks. We got Saddiq Bey, who went off for 11 threes to drop 51 points in a rare Detroit Pistons win. They got 19 dubs on the season. Jordan Poole is currently on a ridiculous scoring streak. He has got 12 consecutive games with at least 20 points. In his last 5 games, he's had at least 25. He is there's only 3 other people who've ever done that. It's him, Kevin Durant, and Steph Curry. Literally it. Sabonis, he pulled off an absolutely absurd game against the Houston Rockets. 30 points and 20 rebounds. That sounds like violence to me. Trae Young dropped 45 points on the New York Knicks, who, I mean, if there is ever a relationship that I love right now in the NBA, it is the random dude from Oklahoma who is balding that just absolutely bodies and lives rent-free in the heads of every New York fan of the New York Knicks out there in the streets. And then still kills him when he shows up to MSG. Those comments in the tweets below that final score, oh boy, they pulling out all the stops. They love to post that lollipop meme where it's just like a lollipop with a bunch of hair on it, and they try and pretend, they try and throw it like it's Trae Young at him. I find that hilarious. That they think is funny. I find that funny. That's the funny part to me, that they think that that's funny and that they think that's working. That's gonna make up for getting smoked for 45 points by the dude that was talking smack before and after the game started. So like Michael Jordan said, he always respected the person that talked shit before the game, because the game wasn't decided then. It's always the dudes that talk shit after the game that's decided that suck. And I've actually adopted that mentality, because there's some people in Quidditch that do that. So other than that, ladies and gentlemen, this is, like I said before, Streaks and Peaks from the top. The peaks were high this week. We had Saddiq Bey, a guy a lot of you haven't even heard of. 51 points for the Detroit Pistons. They beat the Orlando Magic. They got 19 dubs on the season. Jordan Poole, in the month of March, another time he did some really good stuff in the month of March when he was wearing a Michigan jersey, but he is one of 3 Golden State Warriors to ever have a streak like he has, with 12 straight games of at least 20 points. His last 5, he's had 25. Sabonis just absolutely brutalizing the Rockets, 30 points and 20 rebounds. And then Trae Young absolutely breaking the hearts and the minds of every New York Knicks fan by dropping 45 on them in the Garden, ladies and gentlemen. That's your peaks for this week. So we move on. We got a lot of other stuff to talk about. As you guys know, below are listed the high-end NFL free agents that are left. Luckily for me personally, as you guys know, Bobby Wagner is my favorite NFL player. And lately, there have been some rumors swirling about a certain shitty football team that I hate with a passion that has been trying to communicate with one Bobby Wagner. Lose his number, Jerry Jones. He doesn't like your brand of football. I don't know if he actually does, but like on the real though, like for real, like leave Bobby Wagner alone. And it seems like they have. It seems like they've stopped harassing Bobby Wagner. They've got a lot of other things to concern themselves about, like that woman who claims that she is the secret love child of Jerry Jones all those years ago. And then also that one time that that dude snuck into, allegedly, my bad. The one time that dude allegedly snuck into the Dallas Cowboys cheerleaders locker room to peek on them and not even look at them with his own eyes, like record them while they were getting undressed. Awkward shit like that, like stuff that a normal a normal reasonable person would do, right? Yeah. Bobby Wagner wants none of that. Stay away from him. We got key wins in the NBA, man, and then we'll move on to the NFL stuff that's been going down. I got some things to say about the Tyreek Hill trade, and then we are going to wrap this baby up. What's going on in terms of the NBA right now? There are approximately 9 games left in the regular season for most of the teams in the league. I say approximately because some teams have 8, some teams have 10, some teams have 7 when it's all said and done. For instance, we're getting into the point of the season where those teams that missed games due to the COVID outbreak, which I'm sure you all forgot about, that COVID outbreak that happened in December where we all got COVID, including your boy, and had to do the show with COVID, right? They are missing. All those games that are missing, they're starting to remake those up. Those are like at the end of the season, because I think the 76ers last 2 games of the year is versus the Detroit Pistons, and it's makeup games that have no date or time on them. So that'll be interesting. If I was the Pistons, I'd be like, you know what? You take those. You keep those for yourself. You keep those 2 wins. Those belong to you. Consider it a gift from me to you. You know what I mean? I would just give it up to him. But that's just me. Cade Cunningham, by the way. Rookie of the Year candidate. I know he's not going to win it. Everybody knows it's going to be Evan Mobley. But, like, Cade looking like the real deal out here. I know he's playing on a team that's struggling heavily and mightily. Look, y'all know. They're the Detroit Pistons. I don't need to explain it to you. They are a sports team in Detroit. You know what that means. Anyway, key wins that happened. The Pistons won a game. I've mentioned it for the 3rd time because it is very, very important. It is very important to me. It is very important to you, I believe, as well, because they have won 19 games in an 82-game. Well, they look like they're about to win 19 games in an 82-game season. So when these wins come around, you got to celebrate them while you can. The Cleveland Cavaliers got a really clutch win versus the Denver Nuggets, who I watched their game versus the Clippers. Game was a lot closer than the score let it out to be, but Jokic is just like overwhelming. Jesus Christ, man. Like, I don't know. And I've been hearing about how his fast break frequency has been increasing. If you guys don't know, Jokic is like basically become Tom Brady of the NBA. He gets the rebound like above the rim, right? And he immediately turns around and looks for somebody running down the court. He does not hesitate whatsoever, and he throws dimes. He throws dimes to people down the court. So their fast break points are looking like football plays a good chunk of the time, as a matter of fact. And Jokic out here racking up these assists without even having to use any energy, which is a problem if you gotta try and figure out a way to stop a big man like Jokic. You know what I mean? Dude looking like an MVP, back to back, baby. Back to back. I wouldn't be mad at it. The Cavs pulled off a 3-point win versus the Nuggets somehow. That's pretty impressive. Jared Allen, Evan Mobley. Not surprised they can try and pull that off, but the fact of the matter is the Denver Nuggets, although missing Jamal Murray, looking pretty good in like 99% of the time that they're out there on the field. I like it. I like it a lot. Hopefully they can keep up. They can keep the tempo and the pace going. That's the most important thing, right? Because that's what they've really been struggling with. Aaron Gordon, I'm still waiting on Aaron Gordon to really turn up, because I thought that them getting 2 dominant paint presence, like 2 dominant paint area type players. And I get it. Aaron Gordon has got a jump shot, and Jokic has got mad range when it comes to shooting 3-pointers and stuff like that. But the fact of the matter is, those dudes should dominate around the rim. And Aaron Gordon missed a little bit of time, but the fact of the matter is, he's just not. I personally don't feel like he's really going out there and getting what he should be getting. And I get it. When you're around a black hole like Jokic as a basketball player, you kind of, you just there to help out. You know what I mean? As of right now. Since we last recorded this show, you'll be happy to know the Lakers won two basketball games. And Russell Westbrook had a really good game. He had a double-double, like 22 points and 11 rebounds and like 7 assists or something like that. But yeah, no, the Lakers are currently in 10th place. Things not going so great. They are very, very close to being out of the play-in tournament, which of course would make a lot of people happy. Not me. I am not a fan of the LeBron hate because LeBron paved the way for a lot of other people who don't have as much power as he does in the NBA to make stuff happen. So yeah, as of right now, the Lakers are sitting in the last of the play-in spots, but they are currently tied with the New Orleans Pelicans, the exact place that we all thought that both of those teams were going to be at the beginning of this season, right? The Pelicans, technically, with the exact same record. The Pelicans on a 1-game winning streak. The Lakers lost last night. Tell me something new. The Clippers, like I said before, sitting in 8th place, and the Timberwolves in 7th. They slipped a little bit. Same thing for the Mavericks and the Nuggets, because the Jazz kind of jumped both of them. There is between 5th place and 10th place, there is, what is that, 9? There's a 16-game gap. So it's safe to say if you are in that top 5, no playing games for you. If you're in that top 6, no playing games for you. Psych. The Timberwolves are actually just 1 game out of the 6th seed for the Nuggets. They are 3 games out of the 5th seed, though. So, like, the Mavericks getting closer and closer to that situation where they feel pretty comfortable, but 9 games is 9 games in the NBA. And the Timberwolves have actually been kind of cooking, if you haven't been paying attention. Karl Anthony Towns also murdered Jay Crowder in that game where I was talking about Devin Booker called a fan on the sideline a pussy and then drove in. Yeah. Jay Crowder murdered Karl Anthony Towns, and then Jay Crowder got a little upset. It didn't work out for him. Actually, it did work out for them. They won that game. I will point this out about the Lakers' 2 wins. They beat the Raptors, a playoff team, and they beat the Cavaliers, a playoff team. Very good sign. Bad sign about this, they had to score over 120 points to win both of those games because they have one of the worst defenses in the NBA. And when and if they make the play-in tournament, they will have one of the worst defenses in the playoffs. So even if they do survive the play-in tournament, they will more than likely get smoked in the playoffs because, as you guys know, bad defenses get highlighted. Great defenses get highlighted in the NBA playoffs as well. So that's going to be fun for a lot of people. And also, a lot of young guys that you've never seen in a Lakers uniform playing for the Lakers this year. Austin Reeves, a lot of you guys familiar with him because he's a part of that funny meme. But before that, how many of you knew him? You know what I mean? Stanley Johnson back playing for the Lakers again. Shout out to, well, I say back for playing for the Lakers again or whatever. But yeah, Stanley Johnson back in the limelight. You know, some of you guys are familiar with his story. Wild. If you don't know, Stanley Johnson is one of those dudes that comes from a war-torn country. Saw a lot of dead bodies growing up. So, yeah. Oh, by the way, that game versus the T-Wolves, DeAndre Ayton had a career-high 35 points in that one. So that was pretty cool. A dude randomly showed up to a outside of Crypto Arena wearing Michael Jordan's full gear, like literally wearing like the shorts, the shirt, the wristbands in the right places, and the ones to go along with it. And there was somebody who somebody cracked a joke about how he trying to settle who's number one once and for all, and it was a photo of a dude. Like, nobody reacted to it whatsoever because honestly, it's LA and they've probably seen stranger things walking down the street where they live, right? Than a guy dressed up like fully like Michael Jordan, ready to play LeBron James outside the arena. Speaking of, I don't have a segue. Another team in California. There we go. That's the segue right there. The Miami Heat played the Golden State Warriors. Some of you guys probably saw this already. Jimmy Butler got in a fight with the entire Miami Heat roster. There was a conversation, I'll call it a conversation. There was a conversation being had between Eric Spoelstra, who's the head coach of the Miami Heat, and Jimmy Butler. And then you can't see what Jimmy Butler says because it's from the perspective of behind Jimmy Butler. And then all of a sudden, you can see Eric Spoelstra mouth, "Jimmy, do you think I'm going to fight you?" Which is maybe a sign that things are not going great, right? If we're having a conversation about like, hey, do you really think I'm going to fight you? Because one, somebody's gotten to the point where they need to fight. And then two, somebody else is just like, dude, this is like literally we're at work. And why are you trying to fist fight me right now? And then Udonis Haslem, as you guys know, the ultimate vet, literally the ultimate vet. When I say the ultimate vet, he's the super vet, steps in and he says, I will beat your ass 7 times in the face of Jimmy Butler. Still do not know what that conversation was about. Luckily for us, Eric Spoelstra told us what it was about after the fact. He told us everybody was trying to figure out where the dinner plans for the team were after the game was over, which, by the way, they got smacked by the Warriors. So that was real tough for them, especially considering they did not have Steph Curry. So they did not have Steph Curry or Draymond Green. As we're starting to get closer towards the end of the season, the Warriors are kind of like, maybe the old guys, maybe their knees. You know, maybe they get a little bit more ice instead of a few more laps in. You know what I mean? The Heat lost to the Warriors. By the way, just like to point out, Eric Spoelstra, Jimmy Butler, we're still on the court arguing with each other. Jimmy Butler had to be carried away from Eric Spoelstra 3 separate times while they were about to tip off for the second half or whatever. Or not tip off for the second half. They were coming out of a timeout break, and they were about to inbound the ball, and they had to pull Jimmy Butler away from Eric Spoelstra multiple times. Eric Spoelstra threw his clipboard in the vicinity of Jimmy Butler and all that kind of jazz. I would also like to point out the Miami Heat are in first place in the East. Yep. Moving on. The Spurs beat the Trailblazers earlier this week in by the way, the Spurs are in a play-in tournament race right now. So just to give you a perspective, they're currently in 11th place. They are 2 games behind the Lakers. So if the Spurs want to get into the play-in tournament, which if you want to call that the playoffs, sure, I guess you can, they would have to, let's see their last couple of games here. They need to get over the hump. By the way, if you're going to the Rockets Spurs game on Monday, holla at your boy. I'll be there too. So the last 9 games for the Spurs, they will play play-in team. They will play the New Orleans Pelicans, who are a play-in team just 1 spot above the LA Lakers. They'll play the Rockets, the worst team in the NBA right now in terms of win-loss record. The Grizzlies, who are one of the best teams in the NBA in the West in particular. They'll play the Trailblazers again 2 times in a row. The Trailblazers, if you have not heard, they're on the struggle bus. The Spurs will play the Nuggets as well. Tough pull there. The Nuggets are a playoff team. And then their final 3 games, not great. They're playing pretty much all playoff teams from this point on. So they play the Nuggets, who are currently in 5th place, and they need to get those dubs so they don't slip into the play-in tournament. Then the Spurs play the Timberwolves. The Timberwolves are they're a playoff team, and they're currently in the play-in tournament. They're at the very top. They're at the ultimate cutoff. And if they win, they will swap places with the Dallas Mavericks, I believe it is, or the Denver Nuggets. Whoever is in that 5th place spot. Then the Spurs will play the Warriors, the team that is in the top 3 of the West, who will be resting most of their superstars. So their chances of winning that game are actually pretty plausible. And then the Mavericks, who have been real sketchy. This is actually a game that got rescheduled earlier. Because they are these are 2 of the COVID games that they missed. So it'll be interesting to see if maybe the Warriors and the Mavericks, because the Mavericks will know the last night of the season whether or not they are going into the play-in tournament or not. But I would imagine, regardless of what happens, because they've clinched a playoff spot here by this point, maybe, just maybe, they pull everybody and the Spurs are able to slip above the Lakers and keep the Lakers out of the play-in tournament, which I'm sure would make so many people just absolutely ecstatic. I, for one, not one of those people. So I'm interested to see how that all shakes out. And that's a team that's at the bottom of the playoff race, by the way. That's how tense their situation is. Anyway, as I was saying, they beat the Trailblazers. They dropped 13 threes on the Trailblazers in the first half. So that was like a record. That was a team record for first half threes. Kyrie Irving, I don't know if you guys heard this or not. Kyrie Irving does not want to be vaccinated. And according to the city of New York, he no longer has to be able to play basketball in New York. So Kyrie Irving, after waiting it out and playing half of the season, will now be eligible to play for the rest of the games for the remainder of the season for the Brooklyn Nets, which, in case you haven't heard, Kevin Durant is back, but that has not stopped the Nets from slipping all the way to 8th place in the Eastern Conference, baby. They are currently on a 1-game losing streak, and they are 3 games above 500. And if you watch them play, you know why. Seth Curry not really doing as much damage as I thought he would do. Kevin Durant scored 40 points, almost 40 points in a game, and still lost that one. That's a tough one to swallow for sure. So having Kyrie Irving back at a full-time capacity probably going to help, especially considering they're a play-in team right now. They are a play-in team right now, which is a wild. I would be hard pressed to find a normal human being, a sane person, who could have told me, hey, with 9 games left in the NBA season, the Nets are gonna be a fucking play-in team, right? And their last couple of games, not going to be fun. They're playing the Heat tomorrow. They play the Hornets, a team that's like a fringe playoff team. Let me double check where the Hornets are. They're 9th. So that's a matchup, especially if the Nets lose to the Heat. That will be a matchup of 2 teams with the same record, because if the Hornets win the game that they have the night before, they'll be the same record, and then it will put the Nets in a code red situation, I believe. The Pistons, they'll probably win that. They better win that game. They're playing the Pistons. They'll play the Bucks, who are probably not going to let the Nets win that game. They'll play the Hawks. So, the Trae Young thing is real. They'll play the Rockets. Lucky them. They get to play the Rockets. They'll play the Knicks, who are all but out of the playoff race. We'll get to that in a second. Then they'll play the Cavaliers, another playoff team, and then they'll play the Pacers, another playoff team. So a little rough coming down the stretch here, especially since so many of these teams have stuff to play for. Most of them trying to avoid the play-in tournament because it's not fun, and it is technically single elimination if you're far enough down the rankings. Which right now the cutoff line is the 6th seed. So the Hawks, the Hornets, the Nets, and the Raptors are currently in the play-in tournament, and the Raptors are up by 3 games on the Nets as of right now. So they got 3 games in hand with 9 games left. The Nets may have played themselves into the play-in tournament when it's all said and done. I will point this out, the Cavaliers and the Raptors are tied currently. So the Raptors play the Cavaliers, I think the last 2 games. Hold on, they do play each other again. Oh no, it's another team. Anyway, they play the Hawks, which is important. They play the Sixers and the Nets and the Bucks. So they'll do that check that out. Like I said, it's going to be crazy. Like, pretty much every key playoff team that needs to get a win has to play really tough teams to get that win to get into the playoff conversation. And 9 games away, baby. It's looking pretty dope. Isaiah Thomas, yes, the other Isaiah Thomas, the current active one. By the way, there's a dope video of Isaiah Thomas, the old Isaiah Thomas, or quote-unquote old Isaiah Thomas, right? He's like 45 or some shit like that. It's not old. But the old Isaiah Thomas in a shooting competition with one of the Memphis Grizzlies players is pretty cool. He was in a suit too. Like he didn't have the jacket on, but he had the vest and the undershirt on. Isaiah Thomas, IT, the one that used to play for the Celtics and played for like a flurry of teams, the Lakers included, has been signed for the remainder of the NBA season by the Charlotte Hornets. So look forward to that. That's pretty dope. Moving on, ladies and gentlemen, we got other stuff to talk. We got one last subject. It's the NFL. If you guys didn't hear, a couple of major things happened. Just talk about it. Talk about it real quick. The Colts have their third quarterback. Their third starting quarterback in 3 years. So they went from Phillip Rivers to Carson Wentz, who's now Commander Wentz for the nerds. And then Matt Ryan. Come on down. Da-da-da. Da-da-da. Matt Ryan, you've been selected to be the Indianapolis Colts' new quarterback. What do you have to say? A lot of people say he looks pretty good in the uniform. So I will say, I felt like Matt Ryan played better than Carson Wentz did last year. But Carson Wentz does have a massive, massive leg up in terms of athleticism over Matt Ryan. I will also point this out. Matt Ryan does not throw comical interceptions trying to do athletic things. And a lot of people would argue, and maybe I'm wild for this, a lot of people would argue, if Carson Wentz had the sensibilities of Matt Ryan to know his athletic limitations, he could have played himself out of like half the issues that they had. Remember they had like three of his interceptions this season were him going down to the ground trying to throw at a wide receiver with the defender directly in front of him, and one of them turned into a touchdown. Like if he just had like the mental limitations of his athleticism that Matt Ryan puts on himself, Carson Wentz probably would still be the starting quarterback for the Colts, although a lot of people were talking about his locker room presence. If you don't know about Carson Wentz, he believes some things, like very heavily. You can check it out and figure it out yourself. Anyway, Matt Ryan, he and Carson Wentz and Kirk Cousins probably in the same prayer circle, let's be for real. Matt Ryan goes hard in the paint. I think this is a major upgrade. In my personal opinion, I saw Matt Ryan play a bunch last season, and a lot of the Falcons' real major issues were centered around like wide receiver talent, which guess what? The Colts have massive. This is, I tweeted this out when the trade happened. This may be the worst wide receiver group that Matt Ryan's ever had in his career, mainly because he spent most of his career with Julio Jones, and some of it with Roddy White, and some of it with Tony Gonzalez, right? Like, remember that? So he's had like multiple Hall of Famers to throw the ball to over the course of his career, and then when Julio Jones was like on the decline in terms of like his injuries were taking way longer to heal, right? Calvin Ridley showed up. Calvin Ridley got drafted, and they had another star type wide receiver. So not to say that like the Colts wide receivers suck or anything like that. I'm just saying the bar of being a wide receiver for Matt Ryan was very high for a long, long time. And even you talk about Austin Hooper. Austin Hooper made big noise when he was with the Falcons, to the point where it got him a big deal with the Browns, which has now gotten him a big deal with the Tennessee Titans. So. But yeah, Matt Ryan, new quarterback for the Indianapolis Colts. Good luck with that, guys, because so few teams in the NFL value continuity, and maybe it's because continuity is easier to build because of the amount of time as an NFL player you spend playing football. Continuity can be built in a couple of months because you can spend infinity symbol amount of time working on it and knowing what you're supposed to do, because I feel like a lot of people don't realize like how much stuff happens outside of practice for the Colts or for like any NFL team, how much time the wide receivers and the quarterback spend working with each other and the offensive linesmen working with each other and stuff like that. They don't just like all go home and go on vacation. They like meet up and train and stuff like that on a regular basis. So But yeah, new quarterback. Atlanta traded Ryan on Monday to the Indianapolis Colts in exchange for a 2002 third-round pick. And when asked about that, they said it was out of respect for Matt Ryan that they sent him to a team that can't compete. This is a week after failing to trade for Deshaun Watson when they asked Matt Ryan to push his deadline for his roster bonus to $7 million that was due last Thursday. He now represents more than 10% of the salary cap for the Indianapolis Colts. But wait, there's more. Matt Ryan also gave the Atlanta Falcons the sickest prize known to man. The largest dead money cap hit in the history of the NFL. $40 million is the amount of money that the Colts got out of, well, not got out of, but the Falcons were supposed to have due to Matt Ryan, and they never got to that point in his contract where they paid him. And so now, to make sure that they take the full hit for the $100 million contract that Matt Ryan signed, it's dead money on their salary cap and not available for them to spend. So congratulations. Absolutely flawless execution on that one. Marcus Mariota, in place of one Matt Ryan, has signed a deal for 2 years, $18 million to be the next quarterback for the Atlanta Falcons, which has definitely always been a positive upturn for most NFL quarterbacks' careers. I will also point this out. Marcus Mariota has been the backup quarterback in Las Vegas for a while. There was a glimpse of how good Marcus used to be when he was with the Tennessee Titans, that one Thursday Night Football game we saw 2 years ago, I believe, when they played the Chargers, and it came down to like a 1 yard. It came down to the Chargers getting the final drive on Thursday Night Football, one of the more exciting Thursday Night Football games of the entire season. Tons of fun, and Marcus Mariota still looked like he had some juice left in him. He did have an injury that prevented him from playing for like most of the season, which is why this is why Derek Carr never was able to get hurt. They just turned the injuries off on Derek Carr, and they're like, "Oh, it's all good. Thanks, Marcus." New stuff going on in New Orleans. They have re-signed the New Orleans Saints have re-signed quarterback Jameis Winston to a 2-year, $28 million deal. How much of that money is real is left to be decided. $21 million of it is guaranteed, so that means there's going to be $21 million that counts against it on the cap. And the potential for the maximum amount of money he can make is $21 million. I don't know which year has all the guarantees on it, but it's probably the first one because Jameis Winston is still in like a prove-it type mode, but he's going to be able to get some money out of this when it's all said and done. I would also like to point out one thing that made me feel very, very old when talking about Jameis Winston, who, quite frankly, is a better quarterback option than like a good chunk of the players in the league. Only problem is the Saints don't really have any wide receivers you can really depend upon. One thing that made me feel really old is looking at Jameis Winston's age. He is 28. Yes, Jameis Winston is 28 years old. Feels like he's been in the league for 10 years. Whew, man. Dirty Dan is back. Well, he's not back. Dirty Dan is also signed with the New Orleans Saints. If you don't know who Dirty Dan is, he is Daniel Sorensen, who is the most frequently cooked / clutch defensive player in the NFL. There's a lot of times where Daniel Sorensen is just, I felt for like a really long time, and I think I mentioned it on the show as well, I felt for a really long time that Daniel Sorensen took the rap for defensive players who were out of position, and so it put him in a position to get embarrassed, and he got embarrassed because somebody else didn't do their job. But eventually he got pulled, and they put him in situational type stuff. And you can ask Chiefs fans, Daniel Sorensen actually came up with a bunch of clutch interceptions and tackles throughout the back half of the season when he stopped playing most of the snaps. So it's even funnier to see that he has now brought that drama to the Saints. So we'll see what happens. So what else? We got one. Okay, so I got the one big story, right? I got two stories left. And then we are going to do this weird thing in MMA. I just wanted to say this on the show so people can hear how crazy this is, how insane this is right now. The Kansas City Chiefs are trading 6-time Pro Bowl wide receiver Tyreek Hill to the Miami Dolphins. They have also said that they're going to give them 5 draft picks. The Miami Dolphins are going to give them 5 draft picks in exchange for Tyreek Hill. And I feel like the Kansas City Chiefs definitely just robbed the Dolphins. So let's look at it in the grand scheme of things. So it was either pay. Oh, by the way, Tyreek Hill also signed the deal that made him the highest paid wide receiver in the NFL immediately after joining up with the Miami Dolphins. So he is there along with Teron Armstead. They got a couple of other guys to join up as well. So like, Tua's not out there by himself completely. It's not the same group. So getting Tyreek Hill out there adds him to a group that has Mike Gesicki, Jalen Waddle, and Devontae Parker, and that's pretty fucking good. That's pretty good. They also got Chase Edmonds in free agency. That's a good looking offense. Did you notice that I didn't speak about one position in particular? I will say this: they got Teron Armstead. That's going to go a long way in improving the worst offensive line in the NFL. Because quite frankly, that's the source of like most of Tua's problems the first couple of years he's been in the NFL. The pressure that he's faced up front, and you can talk about his arm strength or whatever, but it's kind of hard to throw the ball 60 yards down the field when you're getting pulled down by a D tackle, sometimes. So we'll see. They did everything but fix the one thing that he needed them to fix. So that totally can't backfire on them in the grand scheme of things, right? Moving on. The 5 picks that they got, one was a first rounder, pick number 29. By the way, the Chiefs are now picking back-to-back. They're picking 29th and 30th in the upcoming draft. They also got a second-round pick out of this, which is close, a number 50 pick, which is pretty good. And they got a 4th-round pick, and they got a 4th-round pick, and then for next year's draft, they got a 4th and a 6th-round pick. So that's going to pan out for them pretty well, I feel like. Overall, this year's draft, the Chiefs now have 12 draft picks. Crazy, right? They basically can draft half a new team, essentially. In terms of like a total roster, that like if they go out there and they get 12 draft picks and they hit on 4 of those guys, that's a good day, right? They are also getting all these draft picks as they sit as one of the bottom 3 teams in the salary cap for as they sit as a bottom 3 team in salary cap space for the league right now, which is, of course, a product of the contracts they've had to sign out, including some of the hampering that the Patrick Mahomes contract puts on their salary cap when it's all said and done. That's why I sat back and I was just like, I felt like the Kansas City Chiefs won out on this one, because it was either try and figure out how to completely destroy their salary cap to pay Tyreek Hill all the money that he wanted, or take 5 draft picks and get a bunch of rookie contracts for potential stars, not even potential stars, potential starters at multiple phases of the game, offense, defense, and special teams, because they got to replace a lot of defensive talent, right? They've chosen to keep Frank Clark on the team. He restructured his deal. They have also, there's conversation about Tyrann Mathieu or whatever, but there's been no deal signed yet. Tyrann Mathieu is on vacation last time I checked. Legitimately, last time I checked, he was like in Orlando or something like that. But yeah, it looks like it's gonna pan out for him. For me personally, I think that's what's gonna happen. So we'll see what. I feel like this is a good turn of events for the Chiefs, because it provides a lot of financial relief at the end of the day, because they're going to be on rookie contracts, and then they're going to get 2 first-round picks out of this, which is clutch, because for whatever you have to say, they have signed Marquez Valdes-Scantling, Juju Smith-Schuster, and they still have Mecole Hardman with Travis Kelce, and that's a good 4 people. One, all those guys are pretty big. They're a lot bigger than you would think. And whatever you have to say about the run game is important, I think, because the Chiefs, if they can get a powerful enough run game that can maximize their offensive line, it'll create the balance that they need for their offense to get back to where it used to be, right? Defensively is obviously where they've needed a lot of help in years past. It has been the biggest emphasis, has been the biggest issue for them at key points throughout the course of the season. And I feel like a lot of these draft picks can go a long way, especially considering one of the top positions, if not the top position for the draft this year, is pass rusher and corner. So, and there's no pressure for them to pick a quarterback, so they don't have to deal with the problems that other teams have to deal with, right? Like, there's so much media pressure for some of these teams that actually suck to draft a quarterback. They're not gonna, and of course, everybody's talking about how there's like a super deep amount of running back talent in this draft, and with one of these late round picks, they're probably gonna be able to get a guy who's going to make a big impact in the run game as well, along with Clyde Edwards-Helaire. Remember, they had a litany of dudes. I think they had like 4 or 5 running backs throughout the course of the season, and a couple of them did consistently well, but for the most part, like, you keep drafting until you get a guy who you can depend upon every single down, right? Or get a guy who's going to be the threat that you need him to be, Isaiah Spiller. And the Chiefs are back in it. They're in a good situation. They're in a good place right now, man. I know it's weird to say, but trading away a highly talented player that you cannot successfully pay while maintaining a successful team is going to go a long way. The Chiefs, anyway, Richard Sherman has, like I said, the Chiefs won that trade in my opinion, and only time will tell. But I think with the few free agency signings that they had, they're going to end up being exactly where they want to be. And that's one of the few moves that I've liked from the Chiefs the last couple of years. Richard Sherman's been quote tweeting NFL players after they sign deals, quote tweeting Adam Schefter after NFL players sign deals and asking about, like, why do you think you need an agent? When you're like, he's basically being like, you could have negotiated that deal. And he's kind of like pushing the whole, like, yo, I think he quote tweeted like Morgan Moses signing a 1-year deal or something like that with Washington. He quote tweeted Shaq Mason, who's now with the Buccaneers, signing a 2-year deal. He's like, yo, you could have negotiated that. Like, that agent didn't do anything for you. Which is interesting. I don't know, man. Maybe just people don't want to have that be within their hands. You know what I mean? Some people don't like having to do everything that involves their life. But I guess when you're a business like you are as an NFL player, when you're a multi-million-dollar business, you got to be hands-on with everything that you can get, because at the end of the day, you can only play football for so long. And then all of a sudden, before you know it, you got to live off money that you made your rookie year of your time in the NFL. Other stuff. Mixed martial arts. This is the final segment of the show, and it's just going to be me reading off all the crimes that lately have been going on. There's one happy story in here. It's kind of sad. Kayla Harrison, who I thought is one of the most prominent women that can actually stand toe to toe with Amanda Nunes, and I wanted to see before Raquel beat her, right? And I thought that was Raquel Pena beat her, which is awesome to begin with, because Raquel called Amanda Nunes out multiple times after getting her ass beat by Amanda Nunes the first time, got a rematch with her, went out there, called her shot, went out there and did the damn thing. Kayla Harrison was one of the few people that I thought on the planet right now in terms of women's MMA could compete with Amanda Nunes. So they are also former American top team teammates. And it would have been dope to see them. But apparently Kayla Harrison has signed an extension with the PFL, the Pro Fighter League, which has been paying her well. She won like a $1 million Grand Prix tournament that they had last year or 2 years ago. And has been, she makes it seem like they treat her pretty well. It seems like a lot of people get treated pretty well by the PFL. And they're rising up as legitimate competition for the UFC. Other stuff that went down... Jorge Masvidal allegedly has whooped the ass of Colby Covington, is in custody right now. So the police report doesn't mention a name of the person that was assaulted, but Jorge tweeted at Colby Covington after the event was over. And when I say the event, I mean the ass whooping. And he said, basically, talk shit, get hit, because Colby Covington's been talking about what kind of a father Jorge Masvidal is. And you guys know the rules. No kids and no wives, and that Kobe does not play by the rules, and you honestly, man, you love to see it. Jorge Masvidal apparently needs stitches on his hand, which lines up with the fact that Colby Covington has a chipped tooth from a punch that Jorge threw at him. Apparently he connected twice. One time was like in his face, and the other time was in his mouth. I might not like Jorge Masvidal's politics or really his beliefs in general, but not too many dudes out here mean what they say when they say it's on site. And he made it on site. Like, he went and found Kobe. He found out that Kobe was in Miami at a restaurant. And he was like, I'm going to go put Colby Covington in my line of sight, then whoop his ass. I respect it. Especially considering the shit that Kobe was talking about him in. And maybe, just maybe, of course, Kobe's going to try and flip this and turn it into like, oh, look, that's how in his head that I am and all this kind of jazz like that. Even though they already fought, right? Like, this is one of those situations where Khabib Nurmagomedov attacked Conor McGregor again, where he was just like, the fight is over when I say it's over, and I may have whooped your ass once, but I'm going to take your life now type deal. Same thing with Jorge Masvidal. He's like, I decide when the fight is over, but hopefully Kobe learned his lesson here, man. it's real out here in the streets, especially when you're in Jorge's hometown, man. So, I don't know if it's still on site or not, especially since Jorge is facing like felony assault charges right now, but we'll find out, I guess. Other stuff that happened, this is really weird. Conor McGregor got arrested for traffic violations. Maybe he's got him like stacked up or something like that. And he had to, maybe he had him stacked up. And so when the cop pulled him over, he was like, oh, you've got like 10 speeding tickets, dude, in the same spot. You got to come with us. Because he got arrested and he got released. Chael Sonnen is being charged with 11 counts of battery. It sounds like he beat up 6 people. One of the 6 people was a woman. Yeah, like legitimately they said he like kneed one dude, punched one dude in the face, haymakered another guy. And I don't know if they like jumped him or something like that. From what I read in the story and what I understood from what I read in the story, Chael Sonnen like was apparently being violent towards a woman, and then 5 other dudes showed up and he whooped their asses. So, yeah. I don't know what that was, especially since it seems really out of character for Chael Sonnen. He seems like a person who constantly has his wits about him. And, of course, like attacking a woman, never going to be acceptable in my book when it's all said and done. There's even talk, like even the Kareem Hunt thing, even me, I was like, man, he was wrong for what he did to that lady. But I just don't agree that he kicked that young lady in the head. It seemed like people pulled him away and his leg, whatever. Anyway, I don't know what to say about that, because that really, like, I was like, yo, that's really weird, because that's not like in character for Chael Sonnen at all. Also, all of this is following the fact that Cain Velasquez has been locked up for attacking somebody who molested one of his children. So yeah, it's really weird time in MMA right now. Anyway, and on that note, ladies and gentlemen, I'm out of here as soon as I find the song that I want to end the show with. But yeah, ladies and gents, thank you to everybody who showed up and showed out today, because one, I appreciate that, because I know you could have been anywhere in this wide world of sports, but you chose to hang out with your boy, and I appreciate that. I really do. A lot of good stuff going on just in life in general, trying to make it better. I really am. But other stuff to comment. Oh, sorry, man, I'm trying to fix something real quick, and we can finish the show the way you're supposed to. Don't forget, ladies and gentlemen, wash your hands, wash your ass, and if you have the capabilities, please take a whole shower. Wash your whole body. See you guys next Tuesday for Study Hall. Don't be late. I will, but you can't be late. Shout out to anybody who watches this in the distant future. If you are in the distant future and have the capabilities of reaching back in time, please send me next year's Super Bowl winner so I can bet everything that I possibly own on it. Later.